In the glamorous world of penthouse suites and champagne toasts, scandal waits just around the corner. Meet Richard Westwood, a self-made millionaire with a lavish lifestyle that seems as flawless as a polished diamond. But behind closed doors, his once perfect marriage is about to unravel in the most explosive way. Caught in a 5-star hotel with his clandestine mistress, Richard's carefully built empire of secrets crumbles overnight. His furious wife charges into the scene, vowing to drag them both to court that very day. Get ready for a whirlwind of betrayal, legal showdowns, and shocking twists that will leave you speechless. Richard Westwood was the kind of man who appeared on the cover of Forbes magazine. Immaculate suit, salt and pepper hair, brushed back with meticulous care. An easy smile that hinted at confidence and power. In interviews, he often recounted how he rose from a working-class background in Chicago to become the owner of Westwood Innovations, a tech conglomerate valued at over $5 billion. By 45, he was already a household name in the business world, earning comparisons to magnates like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, and occasionally throwing black-tie galas that even the press found excessively grandiose. To the outside world, Richard's marriage to Catherine Abbott Westwood was as solid as the empire he had built. They married in a ceremony reminiscent of royal weddings. Catherine wore a crystal-beaded gown, flown in from Paris, and paparazzi lined the gates of the estate, capturing each triumphant romantic moment. Over the next decade, the Westwoods made frequent appearances on red carpets, donated generously to charitable causes, and posed for the social pages of magazines that praised their fairy tale union. Behind those glossy pages, however, marriage had grown stale. Catherine, once radiant with idealism, felt a chill of loneliness in her sprawling mansion. She noticed how Richard's enthusiasm for their life together faded with every new business deal that drew him away. Her suspicions about his fidelity started innocently, a lipstick stain on his collar that clearly wasn't hers. Mysterious late-night phone calls and the occasional whiff of perfume Catherine didn't own. But Catherine had been raised in a high-society family that prized composure and reputation. She played the part of the gracious wife at social functions, never letting her fury break that polished facade. Her only confidant was her long-time friend, Madeline Hastings, the only person who saw Catherine's vulnerability and heartbreak. "Don't let him step all over you," Madeline would often advise. "The moment you sense betrayal, strike back before it's too late." Catherine would only nod quietly, unsure of what to do. Still, the thought that Richard might actually be unfaithful felt surreal. He was too careful, too controlling of his public image. If she were to confront him, she would need solid proof, something undeniable that would give her the upper hand. And so she waited, a quiet storm brewing behind calm eyes. Catherine's suspicions deepened one crisp autumn afternoon when she found an anonymous letter slipped under her front door. The letter was typed with no signature or return address. It read, "Check the Harrington Hotel Room, 1802. He's not alone." Startled and unsettled, Catherine confronted Richard that evening. He offered no confession, but maintained a cool civility that only fanned the flames of her doubts. After a terse exchange, Catherine decided to visit the Harrington Hotel herself. She needed answers, and if this cryptic note was the key, she'd follow it. In the days leading up to that fateful encounter, Catherine turned to a private investigator recommended by an acquaintance in the city's social circles. His name was Marcus Green, a man known for his quiet efficiency and steel-like discretion. Marcus's credentials were unassailable. He had once worked as part of a major corporate investigations firm and had ties to reputable legal teams, including the offices of Gloria Allred in Los Angeles for some of his more high-profile divorce cases. Marcus found that Richard had booked the Harringtons' penthouse suite on nights he was supposedly in late meetings. 3 times in the past month, a beautiful woman named Vanessa Lake accompanied him. Vanessa was young, no more than 30, and was employed as a marketing consultant at a small startup, rumored to have some tie to Westwood Innovations. Quietly, Catherine instructed Marcus to arrange a stakeout. She wanted photographic evidence that would hold up in any court. But her anger simmered, transforming her from a hurt spouse into a resolute strategist. In her mind, she was already planning the next steps, the legal route, public opinion, her financial security. She wanted to be ready. On a windy Friday evening, Catherine sat in the back seat of a discreet black sedan parked across the street from the Harrington. She watched from behind tinted windows as couples in evening attire stepped out of limousines, some whisked away by uniformed doormen. At precisely 8 o'clock, Richard arrived in his charcoal-grey Bentley. He emerged looking every bit the successful entrepreneur. Confident stride, tailored jacket, an expression that betrayed not even the slightest worry. Right behind him, slipping from the passenger side, was Vanessa Lake. Catherine's heart pounded. This was the first time she laid eyes on her husband's presumed mistress, petite dark-haired, her figure silhouetted by the street lamp's glow. With camera in hand, Marcus took several pictures from his vantage point, capturing every incriminating detail. Catherine could hardly breathe as she watched the two enter the hotel. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, mingling with anger and heartbreak. But Catherine was not there merely to watch. She planned to confront them. She stepped out of the sedan, steeled her nerves, and made her way into the lobby. The grand marble floors and gilded chandeliers of the Harrington felt more like the setting of a lavish ball than a trap about to be sprung. Catherine calmly approached the front desk and flashed an elegant smile. "Mrs. Westwood." "How lovely to see you," the concierge said, recognizing the famous philanthropist. "Are you here to see Mr. Westwood?" For a moment, Catherine wavered. It struck her how public this confrontation might become. Her entire marriage and the facade they had built could crumble in front of the staff's curious eyes. But in that moment, her resolve was stronger than her fear. "Yes," she replied. "Which room is he in?" The concierge checked the system. "He's in the Imperial Suite Room, 1802. Catherine offered a polite nod and headed to the elevator with measured steps, every click of her heels echoing in her chest like a countdown to an impending explosion. When she reached the 18th floor, Catherine felt her heart racing again, but she steadied herself. She forced herself to remember the humiliation, the lies, the lonely nights at their estate. No more illusions, she told herself. This ends now. Without knocking, she slid the keycard one Marcus had cunningly acquired into the reader. The door clicked open. Inside, the lights were dim, the smell of champagne and perfume thick in the air. Soft music drifted from hidden speakers, and then she saw them. Richard leaning in toward Vanessa, whispering something inaudible, a champagne flute in his hand. It felt like time slowed. An unspoken tension crackled in the air as Catherine took in the stunned faces of her husband and his mistress. For a moment, none of them spoke, as if the gravity of what was happening had robbed them of speech. Then Catherine's composure broke. "How dare you!" she hissed through clenched teeth, her voice low but trembling with fury. "How dare you disrespect me like this in public after everything?" Vanessa froze. Richard tried to mutter something, an apology, a denial, a plea, but Catherine wouldn't have it. She turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. In the hallway, she dialed her attorney, Linda Markfield, a powerhouse lawyer who once took a seat at a conference alongside Alan Dershowitz. Catherine's words were simple. "Linda, get ready. We're taking them both to court tomorrow." News of the incident spread as quickly as Catherine had feared. A bellhop and a hotel guest who recognized the famous Westwoods whispered to the staff. By midnight, rumors were swirling through the corridors of the Harrington. By dawn, the story reached the tabloids, though no one had the full details yet. Headlines teased Westwood, marriage on the rocks and mystery woman in the picture. Meanwhile, Catherine spent the night seething in her attorney's office, sifting through evidence Marcus-provided photographs, phone records, suspicious financial statements. Her goal wasn't just to humiliate Richard. She wanted to secure her future and make a statement. If Richard thought he could treat her like a disposable accessory, he was about to learn how wrong he was. Linda Markfield was the perfect ally for this task. A middle-aged attorney with a pin-sharp gaze and a record of courtroom victories. Linda rarely lost a case. She thrived on high-profile divorces where fortunes and reputations hung in the balance. "We can file for divorce, name her as a co-respondent, and drag him into court for all he's worth," Linda stated with calm precision, scanning the evidence. "But are you sure about doing this tomorrow?" Catherine's eyes glinted with a steely determination Linda had never seen before. "Yes," she said, voice unwavering. "He won't see it coming." Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Richard barely slept. Vanessa hovered nearby, clearly shaken. Richard paced in his penthouse living room phone, clutched in hand. "She can't do this," he repeated, as if a mantra could change reality. "Not tomorrow. We haven't even tried to settle privately." Vanessa, her expression terrified, hardly knew what to say. She had never experienced legal drama at this scale, especially not involving hundreds of millions of dollars. "You should call your lawyer," she managed to whisper, hands trembling. "Fix this before it escalates." But it was already escalating much faster than Richard could control. His phone buzzed with calls from PR teams, board members of Westwood Innovations, and old friends asking what was happening. The empire he spent decades building was about to shake, and he had to brace for the aftershocks. Saturday morning arrived like an ominous drum roll. The usual calm of the downtown courthouse was replaced by a mania frenzy. Journalists from major outlets, the New York Times, Vanity Fair, local Chicago tabloids crowded the steps. They clicked their cameras, jostling for position. Security personnel struggled to keep order, uncertain what exactly was happening, but aware it must be big. Catherine arrived first, stepping out of a black SUV with Linda at her side. She wore a sleek, minimalist black dress and a pair of designer sunglasses that masked any hint of vulnerability. Microphones and cameras immediately assaulted her. "Mrs. Westwood, is it true you caught your husband in a hotel? Do you have any comment? Are you seeking a divorce?" She said nothing. Her stoic expression revealed no sign of regret for turning her family drama into a very public showdown. Moments later, Richard and Vanessa appeared escorted by Richard's personal attorney, Joseph Klein, a high-profile litigator known for his skill in deflecting blame. Richard seemed tense, his usual composure replaced by the ashen look of a man walking toward a battle he couldn't avoid. Vanessa clung to his arm, visibly upset, uncertain of where to stand or how to act under so many flashing lights. Inside the courthouse, Catherine had filed a dual legal action, an immediate petition for divorce and a civil suit alleging emotional distress and harm to her reputation. The second action was almost unheard of in typical divorces, but Catherine wanted to make Vanessa a direct party to the lawsuit, a dramatic move that signaled she wasn't merely going after spousal support. She wanted accountability from both her husband and the woman who assisted in breaking up her marriage. The presiding judge, a no-nonsense figure named Judge Elaine Whitaker, called both sides into a private hearing room before the public hearing. "This level of media attention is disruptive," Judge Whitaker said sternly. "I will decide how to proceed without turning this courthouse into a spectacle." "Understood?" Catherine nodded respectfully. Linda at her side. Richard bowed his head slightly, though it was clear tension gripped him. Vanessa tried to stand behind Richard, but the judge noticed. "Ms. Lake, please stand beside your attorney." Judge Whitaker directed her voice, carrying a subtle edge. Vanessa swallowed nervously, obeying. The judge reviewed Catherine's filing. Her eyebrows rose at the civil suit. "Mrs. Westwood, you've alleged that Ms. Lake contributed to the breakdown of your marriage by knowingly engaging in an affair with your husband. You are seeking damages for emotional distress and reputational harm. Are you prepared for the burden of proof for such a claim?" Linda answered for Catherine. "We have substantial evidence to demonstrate Ms. Lake's knowledge of Mr. Westwood's marital status and her active participation in an affair that caused significant emotional harm to my client. We'll meet our burden." Judge Whitaker nodded slowly, turning her gaze to Richard's attorney, Joseph Klein. "And you, Mr. Klein, your response?" Klein cleared his throat. "We categorically deny these allegations. My client has been faithful." He hesitated, then revised. "My client has attempted to address marital disputes privately. We believe this matter can be resolved without dragging Ms. Lake into a frivolous lawsuit. This is purely a personal matter turned into a public spectacle." "Let me be clear," Judge Whitaker said, her tone steely. "I will not tolerate theatrics in my courtroom. If Mrs. Westwood has filed a valid claim, Ms. Lake is indeed a legitimate party to this suit. The divorce petition and the civil suit will proceed as scheduled." With that, the preliminary hearing concluded, and both parties were ushered into separate rooms to wait for the official hearing time. The stage was set for a very public legal battle that would test the limits of truth strategy and emotional resilience. As the day progressed, Catherine realized that her actions ignited a frenzy among Richard's corporate partners. At Westwood Innovations headquarters, the board of directors held an emergency meeting. Worried about shareholder confidence, they considered whether Richard should step aside as CEO temporarily. The rumors alone were detrimental to the company's image, and every hour that passed with no resolution only added to the turmoil. One board member, Lawrence Pearson, was particularly vocal. "Richard's personal scandal is overshadowing our product launches and raising doubts in the investor community. We need to do damage control." Another member, Paula Romano, defended Richard, insisting that no official wrongdoing has been proven. "We should stand by him until the facts come out." The board remained divided. Amid all this, Catherine received an unexpected phone call from Regina Caldwell, an investigative journalist at the Chicago Tribune. Regina claimed she had information that might help Catherine's case. Intrigued, Catherine agreed to meet at a small coffee shop near the courthouse during a midday break. Regina arrived promptly, her press badge tucked discreetly away. "Mrs. Westwood, I've been following your husband's business dealings for years," she began, sipping her black coffee. "And I can tell you that Vanessa Lake may have more reasons than romance for being involved with Richard." Catherine's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Regina took out a folder of documents. Vanessa Lake's startup, Lakeshore Marketing, was on the verge of bankruptcy 6 months ago. Yet somehow it received a large cash infusion from an offshore account connected to one of Westwood Innovations' shell companies. I suspect it's hush money or an arrangement to keep the affair secret. If this is true, it changes the legal landscape significantly. It suggests conspiracy breach of corporate ethics, possibly even misuse of company funds. Catherine leafed through the documents, her pulse quickening. This is explosive. Why are you telling me this? Regina shrugged, eyes glinting with the fervor of a reporter chasing a major scoop. Because if there's corporate fraud involved, it's bigger than just a scandalous affair. And I believe the public deserves the truth. Of course, I'll be reporting on it regardless. But I wanted you to know first. Maybe it helps your case. Maybe it helps me get the story out more effectively. Catherine thanked her, her mind racing with the implications. If it turned out that Richard used corporate funds to finance or conceal his affair, the legal ramifications would be severe, not just for her marriage, but for his entire company. Divorce court would be the least of his worries. The official hearing convened in a larger courtroom to accommodate the media presence, though the judge restricted cameras to the hallway. The tension was palpable. Catherine and Linda sat at one table, Richard and Joseph Klein at another, and Vanessa sat behind them, her own attorney fidgeting with a stack of legal documents. Judge Whittaker explained the purpose of the day's session, to hear preliminary evidence for the divorce proceedings, determine if there was enough basis for Catherine's lawsuit against Vanessa, and set a schedule for further discovery. It was more procedural than a final trial, but the emotional stakes felt just as high. Linda presented a dramatic opening statement, citing Catherine's emotional distress betrayal and the documentary evidence of the affair. We have hotel receipts, timestamps, and photographic proof that Mr. Westwood and Ms. Lake have been engaging in an adulterous relationship. Furthermore, we will present evidence that Ms. Lake knowingly and willfully participated in this relationship, causing harm and reputational damage to Mrs. Westwood. Klein countered with a calm but pointed rebuttal. We will show that the marriage was already in decline, and that Ms. Lake's involvement was not the sole cause of any emotional distress. Moreover, we intend to question the validity of the evidence and the motivations behind this lawsuit. It appears to be more about vengeance than justice. Vanessa's attorney, a young but determined woman named Sabrina Cho, added, My client refutes any notion that she intentionally sought to harm Mrs. Westwood. She believed, based on Mr. Westwood's representations, that his marriage was effectively over. Judge Whittaker listened intently, making notes. Then Linda dropped Regina Caldwell's bombshell. Your Honor, we have reason to believe there may be financial improprieties surrounding Ms. Lake's startup and Westwood Innovations. We request permission to conduct discovery into financial records that may confirm these allegations. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Richard shot Catherine a look of utter disbelief, as if he couldn't fathom how she could have uncovered this angle so quickly. Klein immediately objected, calling it a fishing expedition. Judge Whittaker rapped her gavel lightly. Mr. Klein, I will allow limited discovery into these financial matters, given their potential relevance to the case. If Mr. Westwood misused corporate funds to facilitate an extramarital affair that could impact the marital estate and spousal claims. She paused, scrutinizing the tension in the room. I'll schedule a second hearing in 2 weeks to review these findings. Court is adjourned, and just like that, Catherine scored a strategic victory. Onlookers, including press and curious members of the public, hurried out to disseminate every detail of the day's events. Within the next 48 hours, chaos enveloped Richard's world. Westwood Innovations' board demanded a closed-door meeting. Worried about potential SEC investigations if any corporate fraud was uncovered, they pressured Richard to go on leave. He refused at first, but found himself cornered when new documents surfaced, revealing suspiciously large consulting fees paid to Lakeshore Marketing. In a tense boardroom, Richard faced Lawrence Pearson and Paula Romano, who were flanked by company attorneys. Richard Paula began kindly, "We want to protect the firm. If these allegations have any merit, the fallout could be catastrophic. Taking a temporary leave might be your best move." Richard clenched his jaw. "You're turning your back on me. I built this company from the ground up." Lawrence, far less sympathetic, sighed. "And we appreciate everything you've done. But the shareholders come first. Step down until the dust settles, or we will vote you out forcibly." Richard's gaze flicked across the room. Every face looked grave. He finally bowed his head, conceding. "Fine. I'll take a leave of absence," he said stiffly, making it clear he had no other choice. Meanwhile, in a quiet cafe on the opposite side of the city, Catherine was meeting Madeline Hastings. They discussed the effect this scandal was having on Catherine's mental well-being. While Catherine tried to maintain a strong front, the reality of dragging her husband, despite everything a man she once deeply loved, through public humiliation, weighed on her heart. "I can't believe it's come to this," Catherine whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "There was a time we were in love, planning our future, wanting a family." Madeline took her hand. "You're doing what you must. He betrayed you and used his power to hide it. Don't let guilt cloud your resolve." Across town, Vanessa's life was unraveling too. Her reputation as a promising entrepreneur was tarnished by scandal. Investors withdrew funding from Lakeshore Marketing, fearing legal entanglements. Paparazzi followed her everywhere, and hate messages filled her social media. She tried to reach Richard multiple times for reassurance, but he was too consumed by damage control to offer her comfort. Fearful and alone, she considered cutting a deal with Catherine, an approach that startled even her attorney. A few days later, Linda's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. On the other line, Vanessa Lake's voice trembled. "I need to speak to Mrs. Westwood. There are things I'm willing to disclose in exchange for dropping the lawsuit against me. Please, I'm desperate." Linda arranged a meeting in her law office after hours. The lights were dim. The atmosphere was thick with tension and anticipation. Catherine, Linda, Vanessa, and Sabrina Cho sat around a long wooden conference table. Vanessa looked worn down, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "Mrs. Westwood," she began softly, "I never wanted to hurt you. When I met Richard, he told me he and his wife were practically separated. I fell for it, his charm, his promises to help fund my company. When he offered that money, I knew it was too good to be true. But I was in love with him, or I thought I was." Catherine listened, her expression unreadable. Vanessa continued. "I'll testify that Richard used corporate accounts to pay me. I have emails, bank statements, everything. I'm willing to hand it over if you drop the civil suit against me." A tear slid down her cheek. "I just can't take this stress anymore. People hate me. My investors are gone. I'm drowning in debt and legal fees." Catherine leaned forward. "Why should I trust you? How do I know you're not just trying to save yourself?" Vanessa's eyes darted to Linda, then to her own attorney. Finally, she reached into her bag and pulled out a USB drive, placing it on the table. "This is my proof. If you use it, it'll bury Richard's career for good. I'm giving it to you because I want to end this nightmare. All I ask is that you name me as a witness, not a co-defendant." Linda picked up the USB, weighing it carefully. "We'll verify this information," she said tersely. "If it checks out, we'll consider removing your name from the suit." Catherine studied Vanessa in silence, trying to gauge if this was genuine remorse or calculated self-preservation. Whichever it was, it could be the key to bringing Richard to accountability. She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll see what your evidence says." The weeks that followed were filled with legal wrangling. Experts pored over the data Vanessa provided. Emails showed Richard explicitly instructing her to send invoices for marketing consultancy to a specific subsidiary of Westwood Innovations, from which payments were funneled into Vanessa's company. Further correspondences contained romantic undertones, solidifying the narrative that this was more than a purely professional relationship. Armed with this evidence, Linda filed new motions upgrading the case to include potential corporate fraud. The public reaction was swift and merciless. Journalists, including Regina Caldwell of the Chicago Tribune, published damning exposés that cast Richard as an unscrupulous executive who blurred the lines between personal and corporate finances to maintain his extramarital affair. Catherine paradoxically became both a figure of pity and a heroine to some. On social media, hashtags like #StandWithCatherine trended, praising her courage for taking a powerful man to task. Others accused her of gold digging and sensationalizing a private matter. She tried to ignore the noise, focusing on the case. The emotional toll, however, was undeniable. Nights found her restless, haunted by memories of happier days with Richard, times when she believed they were building a future together. Richard, sidelined from his company, holed up in his penthouse, strategizing with Joseph Klein on how to salvage both his personal and professional reputation. With the new evidence from Vanessa, any legal defense was shaky at best. "This is blackmail," Richard snarled during one meeting. "She's only turning over those documents to save herself." Klein sighed, massaging his temples. "That may be, but the courts only care about the facts. And the facts look terrible for you right now. If you don't settle quickly, you risk losing everything: your marriage, your company, and possibly even your freedom, if this escalates into criminal charges." Stubborn pride battled with survival instinct in Richard's mind. He hated the idea of capitulating to Catherine's demands, but the alternative might be far worse. "What do you suggest?" he muttered, glaring at the reams of incriminating emails. Klein offered a path forward. Propose a generous divorce settlement, publicly apologize, and attempt to cut a deal with prosecutors if any charges were filed. It was humiliating, but it might be the only way to stem the bleeding. When the next hearing day arrived, the courthouse was again swarmed by media. This time the mood was even more tense, the rumor mill abuzz with talk of new evidence that could cripple Richard. Inside the gallery was packed. Reporters craned their necks, hoping for a glimpse of fireworks. Judge Whitaker started the session. "We are here today to review the results of discovery and decide how to proceed with the divorce petition, the civil suit, and any potential referral for criminal investigation." Linda stood. "Your Honor, in light of new evidence provided by Ms. Lake, we have substantial proof of corporate funds used to finance Mr. Westwood's extramarital affair. My client wishes to move forward with the divorce immediately and seeks a fair division of assets, including potential damages." Klein rose, next face set in grim lines. "Mr. Westwood acknowledges certain questionable financial transactions. However, we maintain that the civil claims against Ms. Lake be dismissed, as Ms. Lake has cooperated fully and is herself a victim of deceit." Judge Whitaker eyed the attorneys. "Is there a settlement on the table?" Linda glanced at Catherine, who gave a subtle nod. "We have received a proposed settlement," Linda said, "but it is not to my client's satisfaction at this time." Klein interjected, voice tense. Your Honor, Mr. Westwood is offering a substantial package, $50 million in immediate assets, the marital home, and full spousal support for 2 years. A hush fell over the courtroom. 50 million was no small figure. Catherine remained stoic, eyes locked on the judge. Finally, Linda continued. We appreciate the offer, but given the public nature of this betrayal, the emotional distress and the revelations of possible corporate fraud, my client believes the offer does not fully compensate her for her losses, both personal and reputational. Judge Whittaker pursed her lips. I see. We'll move to trial if no agreement is reached. But I warn you both parties, a public trial will expose private details you may not want in the open. Richard's jaw tightened. He understood the judge's implication all too well. More secrets could come out. Perhaps secrets even Catherine didn't know yet. That evening, Catherine experienced a moment she never anticipated: compassion for Vanessa Lake. Over the weeks, she saw how much the young woman had lost: money, reputation, opportunities. There was also the nagging thought that Vanessa might have been manipulated by Richard the same way he manipulated Catherine, with illusions of love. Late one night, Catherine asked Linda to schedule a private meeting with Vanessa again. They met in a small conference room, the tension significantly lower this time. I'm dropping the civil suit against you, Catherine said, to Vanessa's visible relief. But I have one question. Why did you come forward with those emails and records? You could have tried to hide them. Vanessa sighed, looking down at her hands. I got caught up in something I couldn't control. Richard always said we'd be together, that he was leaving you, that the money was just to help me until he was free. But it was all lies, a way to keep me quiet. When I saw how serious you were, how fearless, I realized I'd be the scapegoat if I didn't protect myself. Catherine nodded slowly, absorbing Vanessa's words. Richard was never good at letting anyone else share the spotlight, she said softly. Thank you for telling me the truth. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry for what this has done to you too. In the hallway after that meeting, Vanessa called after Catherine. Mrs. Westwood. There's something else. She hesitated, trembling. Before the hotel incident, Richard told me he had a second phone. He mentioned he'd used it to text another woman. I don't have proof, but if that phone exists, there might be even more secrets. I just thought you should know. The idea that there could be yet another mistress or more hidden affairs made Catherine's head spin. The man she married seemed to have layered deception upon deception. But there was no time for shock. She was preparing for what could be the biggest trial of her life. Rain drizzled down the courthouse steps like a curtain of tension, each drop adding to the weight in Catherine's chest. The day of the final showdown had arrived not with a bang, but with a grim, cold whisper from the clouds. Umbrellas clustered around the courthouse entrance as journalists, photographers, and curious onlookers jostled for position. The buzz was deafening. Everyone wanted to witness the collapse of Richard Westwood's empire. Catherine stepped from the black SUV with poise that masked the war raging inside her. Dressed in a navy blue trench coat, with her hair swept into a low chignon, she looked every bit the woman in control. But her palms were damp, her breath shallow. She wasn't just walking into court. She was walking into the final chapter of a life she had once believed would last forever. Inside the courtroom buzzed like a live wire. The gallery was packed: corporate spectators, legal students, even former Westwood employees, hoping to glean a glimpse of justice. Seated beside her powerhouse attorney, Linda Markfield, Catherine inhaled deeply as the bailiff called the court to order. Judge Elaine Whitaker presided with her signature no-nonsense expression. Today, we will hear final testimonies and review evidence to determine the division of marital assets, the validity of the civil suit, and whether referral for corporate investigation is warranted. Are all parties ready to proceed? Yes, Your Honor, Linda said firmly. Catherine took the stand first. Under Linda's guidance, she spoke with raw, quiet strength. She painted a vivid picture of her early years with Richard, how they built a life, celebrated triumphs, and weathered failures. And then she pivoted her voice, cracking only slightly, as she described the loneliness, the suspicion, the betrayal in room 1802 of the Harrington Hotel. It wasn't just the affair, she told the court, eyes glossy, but fierce. It was the complete erasure of the woman who stood beside him for years. He didn't just cheat on me, he tried to erase me. Linda nodded slowly, drawing the courtroom deeper into the emotional core. And what did it feel like when you learned that company funds were being funneled to facilitate this affair? It was like learning the ground beneath my feet had never been solid, Catherine whispered. The marriage, the trust, even the company. It was all a facade. Then came the moment everyone anticipated, the introduction of evidence from the second phone messages, secret payments, encrypted emails. It wasn't just Vanessa. There were flirtations with other women, coded language payment promises, travel arrangements. The court didn't have full names, but the patterns were damning. When Richard was called to the stand, he looked visibly diminished. The man who once dominated boardrooms now shifted nervously in his chair, his tailored suit seeming to hang looser on his frame. Joseph Klein did his best to humanize him. Mr. Westwood was under significant pressure. He made regrettable decisions. Yes, but he is not a criminal. He is a man who lost control. Under cross-examination, however, Linda exposed the cracks. Richard struggled to explain the payments, especially those that couldn't be tied to any legitimate business service. When asked about the second phone, he stammered. It was for privacy, he muttered. I needed to separate personal and professional. You mean to separate your lies from your obligations? Linda countered sharply. The courtroom held its breath. Then came the final blow. Vanessa Lake's recorded testimony, previously submitted to the court, was played aloud. In it, she detailed how Richard had instructed her on how to submit invoices to shell companies. He said it was the only way we could keep our arrangement private. Her voice echoed in the courtroom. I didn't realize how deep it all ran until it was too late. Judge Whitaker called a recess to allow both legal teams to confer. The mood shifted rapidly. Buzzing whispers, hurried scribbles from reporters. In the private conference room, Richard was pale, sweaty, and visibly shaken. I want to end this, he said, finally looking Catherine in the eyes for the first time in weeks. I'll give you more. Just end it before it gets worse. Catherine didn't flinch. She turned to Linda. Make it ironclad. Hours later, the courtroom was called back into session. Linda stood with the final declaration. Your Honor, we have reached a comprehensive settlement agreement. Mr. Westwood will transfer $100 million in liquid assets, $50 million in Westwood Innovation stock, and the marital estate to my client. He will also issue a public apology and agree to cooperate with any regulatory investigations. Klein rose to confirm. The terms are accepted. Judge Whitaker nodded solemnly. The court approves. The divorce is hereby finalized. A hush spread through the courtroom. Catherine sat motionless for a beat, then exhaled as if releasing a weight that had been crushing her for years. Her marriage was over, but so was the deception. She walked out of the courtroom, not just with wealth, but with dignity intact, her head held high. Behind her, Richard Westwood remained seated, staring blankly at the polished wood of the courtroom bench. He had built an empire on image, but in the end, it was his character that failed him. Word of the settlement echoed through the courthouse, like a storm rolling across a silent valley. The buzz in the hallways was instant. Reporters dashed out to break the story. Camera crews scrambled for position, and social media lit up with speculation. The numbers were staggering. $100 million in liquid assets, $50 million in stock options, and full ownership of the marital estate. It was one of the largest divorce settlements in Illinois history, and it was over in a matter of hours. Catherine sat quietly as Judge Whitaker finalized the paperwork. The gavel struck once sharply, sealing the end of her marriage to Richard Westwood. A decade of shared history, wealth and heartbreak concluded with one sentence: the divorce is granted. Outside the courtroom, flashes from camera bulbs blinked like lightning. Catherine stepped forward, flanked by Linda Markfield, her armor of calm still intact. The press surged, shouting questions. Mrs. Westwood, how do you feel about the settlement? Will you be pressing charges? Was it worth the public exposure? Catherine paused at the top of the courthouse steps. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady and resonant. This is not a victory. This is the conclusion of a painful chapter. But I stood up for myself, and for every woman who's ever been silenced by power and betrayal. Now I choose peace. Then she turned and walked away, leaving reporters shouting behind her, their voices swallowed by the clicking of heels and thunderclouds gathering in the distance. Inside, Richard remained seated in the courtroom, slumped in a chair that seemed suddenly too large for him. His attorney, Joseph Klein, whispered something he didn't hear. His thoughts were consumed by what he had just lost: his marriage, his reputation, and the company he'd built from the ground up. The settlement had not just dented his fortune. It had shattered the illusion of control he once clung to. As part of the settlement, Richard agreed to cooperate with any regulatory investigations. With the financial records Catherine now had, it was only a matter of time before Westwood Innovations would come under formal review. The board had already voted to suspend him indefinitely as CEO. His fall from grace was no longer speculation, it was reality. Vanessa Lake, sitting quietly at the back of the room, had watched the proceedings unfold with a mix of dread and relief. She was officially removed from the civil suit, but the damage to her name was irreversible. Her business was defunct, her investors had fled, and the online harassment had not ceased. She slipped out of the courthouse unnoticed, head down, scarf wrapped tightly around her face. That evening, Catherine returned to the estate alone. The house felt cavernous, now more a museum of broken promises than a home. Yet it was hers. She walked through each room in silence, taking in the portraits, the polished floors, the memories etched into corners she used to overlook. In the master bedroom, she found herself staring at the empty bed, recalling all the nights she had laid there alone, while Richard claimed to be working late. She did not cry. Instead, she opened the French doors to the balcony, breathed in the cool night air, and allowed herself the smallest, quietest smile. It was over. Not just the legal battle, but the constant waiting, the emotional exile, the slow erosion of her self-worth. Now she could rebuild. In the days that followed, Catherine's life took on a new rhythm. She avoided interviews, ignoring offers from talk shows and reality TV producers eager to capitalize on her story. Instead, she focused on something that had long been neglected herself. She hired a financial advisor and began planning charitable initiatives, a scholarship fund for young women in law grants for small businesses owned by women of color, and a crisis shelter for women experiencing emotional abuse. At a press fundraiser weeks later, she stood on stage, a portrait of composed resilience. "My story is not unique," she told the crowd. "Millions of women experience betrayal, deception, and emotional devastation without the cameras, the courtrooms, or the settlements. I want to use what I've endured to make sure others don't feel as alone as I once did." The audience gave her a standing ovation. Meanwhile, Richard faced a much darker aftermath. Regulatory agencies launched a full inquiry into Westwood Innovations. Anonymous tips, likely sparked by Vanessa's documentation, revealed years of financial mismanagement and creative accounting. His assets were frozen, and subpoenas began piling up. His private penthouse became a prison of seclusion, his phone eerily silent, his allies scarce. He issued a public apology on social media, ghostwritten by PR specialists, but it did little to stem the tide of public opinion. The man once hailed as a visionary entrepreneur was now a symbol of arrogance, deception, and downfall. As for Vanessa, she quietly left Chicago. A friend told a tabloid she was living somewhere in Northern California, under a new name, writing a memoir that might never see the light of day. Her once bright career now existed only in archived web pages and forgotten LinkedIn profiles. But for Catherine, the future no longer felt like something to fear. It was hers to shape. She wasn't just the woman who took down Richard Westwood. She was the woman who stood back up. The media firestorm surrounding Richard Westwood's fall from grace didn't fade. It only evolved. In the weeks following the court's dramatic ruling, headlines continued to dissect every angle of the case: the betrayal, the financial scandal, and the unprecedented settlement. Cable news analysts debated Catherine Westwood's courtroom strategy, calling it a masterclass in elegant vengeance. Her name trended for days, not as a scorned wife, but as a woman who fought back and won. But while the world buzzed, Catherine withdrew. She remained in Chicago, living alone in the palatial estate that once felt like a gilded cage. Now it was hers, but it bore the echoes of too many broken promises. She kept the doors open during the day, letting sunlight spill across marble floors, breathing life into rooms that had once felt too cold. At night, she would sit on the terrace with a glass of wine, reflecting not just on what she had lost, but on what she had reclaimed. Peace, freedom, her voice. Rather than allow her victory to become tabloid fodder, Catherine poured her energy into something meaningful. With Linda's guidance, she launched a foundation called the Abbott Initiative, named after her mother's family, known for its legacy of civic service. The foundation offered legal aid and emergency funding for women navigating divorce, coercive relationships, and financial dependency. It wasn't just philanthropy, it was healing. At the initiative's launch, Catherine spoke candidly for the first time since the settlement. "I never imagined I'd be standing here, not as a wife or socialite, but as a survivor and an advocate," she said. "What happened to me was personal, painful, and very public. But if my story can give another woman the strength to walk away, to speak up, then it wasn't for nothing." Applause filled the hall. For the first time in a long while, Catherine smiled not out of politeness, but from a place of genuine pride. Elsewhere in the city, Richard Westwood was unraveling. Once at the helm of a $5 billion empire, he now found himself exiled from the very boardroom he built. The Securities and Exchange Commission had formally opened a case investigating whether Richard misused company funds for personal gain. Lakeshore Marketing. The startup run by Vanessa Lake had been dissolved. Several shell corporations linked to Richard were under audit. Bank accounts were frozen. Depositions loomed. He had lost not only his company, but his reputation. Richard tried to maintain appearances. He hired a new PR team. He issued a carefully worded apology on national television, claiming errors in her judgment and citing the strain of leadership. But the public wasn't buying it. Stockholders pulled out. Business journals published editorials calling him a cautionary tale. The man once compared to Steve Jobs now became a meme for corporate greed and personal downfall. In private, Richard fared worse. His penthouse, once a symbol of his triumph, grew silent and suffocating. He'd pace for hours replaying every mistake, every conversation, every choice that had led to this cliff's edge. He tried reaching Catherine twice, once through her lawyer and once through a hand-written letter. Both were ignored. He understood. And it hurt. Vanessa Lake, too, had vanished from the spotlight. After turning over critical evidence, she packed what little she had and moved to California. A contact told a magazine that she was living near Monterey, working anonymously as a freelance copywriter. Rumors floated about her writing a memoir, but if she was, it was in secret. She wanted nothing more than distance from the scandal from Richard, from the name Vanessa Lake. And yet she couldn't quite escape the guilt. In quiet moments, she still replayed the look on Catherine's face the night they met across the table, Vanessa trembling with shame. That look of resolve and heartbreak haunted her more than anything else. Meanwhile, Catherine pressed on. She redecorated the estate, stripping away the cold opulence Richard once prized. She filled it with warm, light, vibrant art and open space. She hosted book clubs, charity dinners, and mentorship circles for young women entering law. Each gathering became a testament to resilience. Madeline Hastings, her loyal friend, through it all remained her closest confidant. Over tea one morning, Madeline leaned across the table and asked, "Do you miss him?" Catherine didn't answer right away. She looked out at the blooming garden, thought of all the versions of herself she had shed. "I miss the man I thought he was," she said softly. But that man never really existed. And with that, she turned the page in her heart. By autumn, Catherine's face graced the cover of Chicago Life magazine, not as a wife, but as a philanthropist. The headline read, "From Betrayal to Brilliance, Catherine Westwood's Second Act." In the interview, she spoke about the power of starting over, of owning your narrative, of refusing to let someone else's decisions define your future. The story resonated. Women across the country sent letters, emails, and messages thanking her for standing tall. Some shared their own stories of betrayal and survival. Others simply wrote, "Thank you for reminding me that I'm worth more." Catherine read every word. One night, as she walked through the garden beneath the stars, she whispered to herself, "I thought this ending would break me." But it became my beginning. And so, with the world watching, with Richard retreating into obscurity and Vanessa learning to live again, Catherine did what few expected. She didn't fade. She rose. The roller coaster drama of Richard Westwood's downfall and Catherine's quest for justice is a cautionary tale for anyone enthralled by wealth and power. When secrets bubble to the surface, the empire you've built, no matter how grand, can crumble overnight. As Catherine stands on her own 2 feet, she realizes that true security doesn't come from a lavish lifestyle, but from self-respect and integrity. Vanessa's desperate search for an escape and Richard's looming legal reckoning show how tangled the web of lies can become when ambition collides with betrayal. Thank you for joining us on this wild ride. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video. Share it with friends who love a good drama and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling tales. Your support helps us create more content that pulls back the curtain on scandal heartbreak and ultimate redemption. Stay tuned for our next riveting story.